Last year for Halloween, I highlighted 2 movies in the Psycho franchise, an unlikely but enduring series that was largely carried by Anthony Perkins' amazing performance as Norman Bates. He was a fantastic actor who, despite being typecast in disturbed roles, did have a wide range. What I would not typically associate with him, however, is a sitcom, a genre I'm not entirely certain he should have dipped his toes into. But nevertheless, in 1990, he starred in an unsold pilot for the spooky, never-to-be-realized series The Ghostwriter. It's a bizarre step back into a world that never was. Prepare to die of laughter.
I've always found that an enjoyable way to kill a little time.
Not to be confused with the 1992 PBS show of the same name, although that show was awesome. The Ghostwriter tells the story of horror novelist Anthony Strack, his new wife, and their children. The two families could not be more different, and while they try to make things work, a new problem arises from the grave in the form of Anthony's deceased first wife. Basically, it's the Addams Family meets the Munsters without really understanding what made either of those series work. Here's one of the things that bothered me, and in all fairness, this can be said for a lot of sitcoms of this era. It's just kind of awkward and not how people act or speak.
I've run away. Goodbye, Edgar.
Anthony, what's your opinion of this?
Succinct and brimming with suspense. The boy certainly takes after me.
What's your opinion of this?
There are a lot of moments where Anthony Perkins is clearly reading from cue cards, which doesn't really help the whole unnatural feeling of it all. It creates this disconnect with their interactions. This is further demonstrated by the timing of the jokes, an important element in comedy that is next to non-existent here.
Miss Blasco, here is the perfect example of why you should serve only kosher.
Overall, it makes the relationship between these characters hard to buy and makes most of it seem pretty disingenuous. Which isn't to say that there aren't moments, however, because ironically, the scenes that work the best are the ones that leave most of the jokes out. Just watching the scene between Anthony and his son Edgar at the late Mrs. Strack's grave, you can see just how good these actors are when they have better material.
A wise man named Hippocrates once said, "Through tragedy we learn. All roads of learning begin in darkness and go out into the light." Now, it's taken 10 years of darkness for me to learn that light is Elizabeth.
And the real kicker here, part of the scene was cut when they finally aired it. I can't say how much since I'm reviewing a work print here, but this really was an important scene, not only for making us care a little more, but also as a turning point in the story. That being said, this Edgar kid, I don't understand him. I get what they're going for, but I don't. They've got these weird sexual and incesty undertones with him that I'm not entirely comfortable with.
Edgar, I have no qualms about disciplining you.
Please do. I love to be disciplined.
True, you are the only boy who, after spankings, leaves a tip.
Miss Blasco, should you be wearing an outfit like that in front of young Edgar?
Why not? He bought it for me.
What was that delivery? What was that? Edgar's constantly threatening and terrifying his new sister Cindy, and no one seems to take this seriously. In fact, Anthony seems to encourage it. And this is not just silly, oh haha, kids be kids stuff. This includes making her believe he's committed suicide. This is psychological torture. The reasons jokes like this worked in the Addams Family or the Munsters is because they all took pleasure in the macabre, not torturing everyone else because they're miserable. And when normies did get frightened by them, there was no malice there, they were just different. Except for MC Hammer, I don't know what he did to deserve that. But otherwise, I stand by my point. I mean, am I supposed to laugh that Cindy is so traumatized she believes her new stepfather will kill her?
Cindy, are you enjoying that salad?
It's great. The best salad I ever had. Believe me, please. You gotta believe me.
She's got good reason to be terrified, but her mother Elizabeth just seems in her own little world through this whole spectacle. She's the character I probably understand the least. It doesn't seem like she knows her new husband well at all. She doesn't even seem to get his vibe. And they never explain how Elizabeth and Anthony's relationship came about, other than one line about meeting at a book tour and coming back married. They interact as if they've just met, even though they're already married and have been living in the same house for a week now.
Were you aware that he's constantly telling my daughter that he's the Antichrist?
He's such a rapscallion.
What's your opinion of this?
Was this a shotgun wedding? How long have they known each other? The timeline is nebulous. If the quick wedding was the joke, it's not played up at all. There's barely any evidence on screen that these two even like each other that much. In fact, a lot of the jokes hinge on us thinking he might murder her at any second. Is Elizabeth into horror novels and spooky things? That might be a nice contrast to have her look normal but actually be the creepy one, but we know nothing about her. This is a real problem because the plot of the episode is all about their relationship, but I don't know why this odd couple actually works by the end. When Elizabeth thinks her stepson is dead, Anthony just leaves her outside to hyperventilate and the laugh track plays. Is this funny? And this seems strange to say, but Anthony Perkins is not terribly creepy in this. They're really banking on the psycho vibe selling it, but I just don't see why everyone reacts the way they do to him a lot of the time.
Well, dang, that wouldn't frighten anybody.
They say he's obsessed with his previous wife because he keeps a portrait of her, but I don't really see any evidence of him being weird about it until Elizabeth makes it weird. She tries to guilt trip him into basically picking one or the other, which is so not fair. I mean, the real reason she should be mad is because he's kind of a jerk. Like, if this is our introduction to them as a couple, I'd hate to think how their relationship would have been in an entire series.
I'm through living in the shadow of another woman.
But why? You do it so well.
But he doesn't even seem to like his first wife either. He's afraid of the portrait and seems kind of bitter about her.
I'm sure that she's quite happy that you found someone else.
I doubt that. She's probably insane with jealousy.
It's Elizabeth's removal of the portrait that sets off a series of ghostly events and ends with Anthony's first wife rising from the grave. This includes one of the few effective jokes in the episode, where the former Mrs. Strack tries to murder the latter Mrs. Strack.
It's too late. She's dead. Oh. Oops, sorry, my mistake. Call the ambulance.
Okay, but again, we're supposed to believe that he's in love with this woman. Well guys, hope you're ready to see Anthony Perkins talking to a skeleton from Spirit Halloween, because that's what's gonna happen. The most interesting part is when the first wife comes back from the dead, but that's 6 minutes to the end. They both move on, and Anthony gets an idea for the ending of his new novel. While I did appreciate a little more emotional weight, and it makes you care more about the characters, it does come off a bit like a watered-down Tales from the Crypt without any real comeuppance.
Remember that vow we took, till death do us part? You exercised your option.
Okay, so after having gotten the rundown, can you honestly tell me what the premise of this series is going forward? If I hadn't read the IMDb summary, I wouldn't really have any idea. According to that, Anthony would be visited by unearthly beings to help him write his stories. But then again, it also says he's so racked with writer's block he's ready to commit suicide. And that's like, not what happens at all, so who knows?
What's she got that I haven't got?
A pulse.
But let's go with the ghosts every week angle. We see from the very first shot that Anthony Strack is already a successful novelist. And not just that, he's the world's best-selling horror novelist.
After all, I'm the world's best-selling horror novelist.
As we can see, he's already written lots of horror-themed books about ghosts. Does he even need spirits to visit him? What story are we telling about the world's best-selling horror novelist continuing to be the world's best-selling horror novelist? I do want to know more about his book, Am I Dead or Just in Pittsburgh, though? I guess I'm just confused about how the show would continue going forward. It's a little muddled. It could have been better as a complete series. After all, pilots are often kind of clunky, and some jokes don't really land, especially in sitcoms. If things had been a little bit clearer, the idea was in there somewhere. It had a lot of elements I really enjoy, especially mixing humor with horror. I just wish it was a little better. But in the end, there just wasn't enough to tell if this was going to be anything good.
Why do we always refer to dead people as late? Why not eternally tardy?
How did this even happen, though? It's just such a strange mixing of things. Well, Anthony Perkins was close friends with Alan Spencer, who's famous for creating cult classic Sledgehammer, a satirical cop show in the vein of Police Squad. Perkins approached Spencer about creating a sitcom for him because he started out on stage doing comedies. So that was really his only requirement: make it funny and have a live audience. I can't speak for his play performances, but he did say Psycho was one of the funniest films he ever did, so I can certainly see his sense of humor. And Spencer and Perkins are not the only noteworthy names attached to this. This pilot actually has quite a stellar group behind it. There were many Emmy Award-winning members of the crew and several people that were involved in well-known horror properties, including Nancy G. Fox, who did wardrobe and costuming for The Howling, Cujo, Tales from the Crypt, and Teen Wolf, producer David Dakota, who frequently worked with Charles Band, director of Puppet Master 3, Creepazoids, but you might remember him best as the creator of A Talking Cat? Joshua John Miller was in Near Dark and Halloween 3, and he also wrote another cult horror comedy called The Final Girls. You might also remember him from Teen Witch, a movie you might be hearing about this month. Leigh Taylor is best known for her role in Soylent Green, and interestingly would guest star in another sitcom about a novelist who uses real life to inspire their books that same year, something called Over My Dead Body. Juliet Sourcey, of course, you will remember from Baywatch when she hung out at everyone's favorite video game liquor store. And the paramedic is Larry Wilmore? I don't know, this copy's pretty bad. I'm just gonna take your word for it, IMDb. Most notable, I think, is the inclusion of Anthony Perkins' stunt double, Kurt Paul, as Paul Bearer. I'm guessing WWF didn't know about this. Like Anthony Perkins, Kurt would occasionally play roles capitalizing on his Norman Bates fame, and even played Norman Bates himself in the failed 1987 Bates Motel pilot. And, of course, he worked on Spencer's previous series Sledgehammer as Coroner Norman Blates. You might be hearing about one of his other Bates-esque roles this month. Point is, even with a really awesome cast and crew, sometimes things just don't work out. And even though I think it was a bit of a mess, I still admire what was put into it.
You call that natural causes?
Well, of course. I mean, you take a nasty fall and break your neck, naturally it causes you to die.
Alan Spencer was fairly ambitious with the idea, creating expensive gothic sets and using live special effects. They developed the idea for ABC, but the network thought it was too dark and it got shuffled over to Fox, which was still pretty new at the time. And actually, the pilot tested pretty well and got good reviews from the audience, but Spencer was busy heading another project at the time and Fox decided to pass. Additionally, this was right around the time Anthony Perkins was diagnosed with AIDS, and my instinct is that it had to be a factor in things not panning out. 2 years later, he sadly passed away. A lot of different elements just didn't come together with Ghost Rider, but I'm glad we got to see this interesting lost artifact. We may never know what could have been, but it's a fascinating watch. If you get a chance, check it out. You can find the whole thing on YouTube, and it's a nice, spooky watch for the Halloween season.
I write from experience.